On May 30th, 2025, a post by user RealFreezy1 began to blow up on Twitter. The post showcased a piece of audio hidden in the files of Sister Location that is played only twice on night 5 and at a very quiet level. It plays specifically when you reveal the small keypad tucked inside Circus Baby's head. Take a listen. From what we can gather from the game files, this sound is simply titled Guts, and upon hearing it, Cryonite and I became most afraid, as given the point in the game at which this plays, we thought it was supposed to be Elizabeth's bones and blood crunching and sloshing around inside of Baby's stomach, which threw me off because if Sister Location takes place when we think it does, that body should have already been removed. Refusing to accept that Sister Location takes place like a few days after Elizabeth's death, I began thinking of some other possibilities to explain this sound. Using everything I could to brainstorm, I eventually found my way to the animatronic schedule hidden in the scottgames source code before the game's release. A detail that had been covered when it first appeared, but that faded into obscurity soon after. Cryonite and I spent hours combing through this tiny chart, and we found something worth talking about. See, there are patterns in that schedule, subtle ones, specific status conditions for the animatronics that line up with the game's events in curious ways that suggest that Sister Location is less about a single tragedy and more about an ongoing project. Let's examine this schedule together. It's a week-long schedule that lists 5 animatronics: Baby, Ballora, 2 Funtime Fs, and an out-of-service animatronic. For each day of the week, they're assigned specific status conditions: available, booked, private, or maintenance. Now, after the game came out, most people dismissed this. The general assumption was, oh, cool, this was just a way to hint toward the fact that Sister Location takes place in a rental facility. And while that's true, that's not all this schedule is saying. In fact, it tells us something much more important. And to explain what, we need to fast forward to night 1 of Sister Location. The game opens with Hand Unit explicitly telling us that we're working at a rental service.
Allow me to fill this somewhat frightening silence with some light-hearted banter. Due to the massive success, and even more so the unfortunate closing of Freddy Fazbear's Pizza, it was clear that the stage was set, no pun intended, for another contender in children's entertainment. Unlike most entertainment venues, our robotic entertainers are rented out for private parties during the day.
So, if the schedule was only meant to hint at that, it feels bizarre that the game would give away that information almost immediately. Then there's our job. Each night in Sister Location, Hand Unit provides a predetermined set of tasks for Michael to complete, different from typical FNAF gameplay. On night 1, we're told to shock Ballora, shock Funtime Foxy, shock Baby, and then go home. That's it. Funtime Freddy is noticeably absent from night 1. We're not asked to do anything involving him. Now, on night 2, the tasks change just slightly. Shock Ballora, shock Funtime Foxy, shock Baby. But this time, we do have a run-in with Funtime Freddy. Specifically, we're sent to the breaker room because Freddy's been tampering with the power, causing the controlled shock buttons to stop working. Then we spend the rest of our shift trying to fix the breaker. And at the start of our next shift, Hand Unit notes that he's upset with our performance and that we didn't meet the expectations for that shift. Here, take a listen.
Now that your elevator experience has been customized to your needs and you're thoroughly relaxed, it's worth mentioning that due to your lackluster performance yesterday, your pay has been decreased by a substantial amount.
Compare this to night 1. We're sent to shock 3 animatronics, just like on night 2, But this time there's no complaint from the hand unit the following morning. That stuck out to me, so I pulled the chart back up and began looking through everything on it. Baby, out of service, Monday, maintenance, ballora, available. And it clicked. The structure of night 1 and 2, who we're tasked with visiting and who we're not, lines up perfectly with Wednesday and Thursday night on the source code schedule. Let me explain in order. Out of the 4 animatronics on Wednesday, 3 are booked. These are Baby, Ballora, and Funtime Foxy. Hand unit even describes Baby as having a
busy day today. Let's check the light and make sure she's in proper working order.
And this is because she was booked for a party that morning, like it says on the schedule. The only animatronic that wasn't booked was one of the Funtime Fs. And what did we already establish? There's no instructions to shock Funtime Freddy that night, making him the bottom Funtime F on this schedule. We don't need to do anything to him because he didn't go out that day. Then, on night 2, our tasks are to shock Ballora, Funtime Foxy, and Circus Baby before our night gets disrupted and we need to reset the breaker. Upon taking all night to do this, hand unit becomes upset with our performance. This is because night 2 is Thursday. All of the animatronics were booked that morning. When we get to the bunker at night, hand unit expects us to shock all of them, but we don't have time, so he's upset with our performance and docks our pay. Looking at this pattern, we can say animatronics marked as available, the ones who were not rented out to parties that morning, don't need to be shocked at night, while animatronics marked booked, the ones that did go out to parties that morning, need to be shocked. We never really questioned why we shocked the animatronics. We just kind of do it because we're told to, but when you sit down and think about it, and more importantly, when you think about when we shock each of them, it lines up perfectly with Michael's work week, starting on this Wednesday and ending on this Sunday. Let's continue. On night 3, we don't shock Baby, only Ballora and Foxy. In fact, hand unit specifically tells us that
there is no need to check on Baby tonight. Please refrain from entering unauthorized areas.
Now, why would he emphasize that there's no need to check on Circus Baby on this particular night of the game? Well, let's look at our trusty schedule. Night 3, Friday, tells us that Circus Baby was available that morning. She wasn't rented out. The remnant inside her hasn't been disturbed by interacting with new children, so she doesn't need to be shocked. Funtime Foxy and Ballora are both booked on Friday, and we shocked them, so that lines up with Friday being night 3 as well. On night 4, Saturday, both Funtime Freddy and Funtime Foxy are scheduled for maintenance, while Baby and Ballora are reserved for something private. And in the gameplay of night 4, exclusively Baby and Ballora are together in the scooping room. And Baby literally starts shit-talking Ballora about how she never learns.
Ballora never learns.
She's complaining about something that happened at the private show earlier. Today, night 4, is also the first time maintenance technicians other than Michael appear in the bunker. And guess what? Saturday, night 4, is the first of 2 maintenance days.
But T-Dreads, you're wrong. It's a private party day for Ballora, not a maintenance day, so why is Ballora in the scooping room? Theory debunked.
And to that I say, you need to pay less attention to the fact that it's a maintenance man talking, and more to what the maintenance man is saying.
Okay, bring her over. Forward. More. Okay, stop. Set her down. Watch the step.
What happened to it this time? Just seems like these things can't go a day without breaking down.
Who knows? It's always the same, man. Some kind of hardware malfunction.
Well, I have to be somewhere in 15 minutes, and this place gives me the creeps. Can we just get this over with?
What happened to it? I have to be somewhere? These technicians have been called in to work. They need to scoop Ballora because she broke down at the private party her and Baby were rented out to that day, which is why only her and Baby are here and why Baby is mad. Ballora breaks down at this private party, and now the technicians have to go out of their way to prep her for tomorrow's maintenance, when their night's work should have been completed by now. They ask what happened because they've been called in on short notice and don't know what's going on. If night 1 takes place on Wednesday, then this schedule literally lines up perfectly with the game. After days that animatronics are scheduled, you shock them until they start acting normal again. That's why you shock Ballora and Funtime Foxy almost every time you check on them, and why you specifically don't have to shock Baby on night 3. For the 3 of them, this schedule explains everything that happens in this game if night 1 is on Wednesday. And look, just thinking about this source code schedule, it makes no sense for Scott to ever give us this unless we could figure it out. Look specifically at the fact that there are 2 Funtime Fs. Scott doesn't specify which Funtime F is Foxy and which is Freddy on this chart. And that's because we can use the game to solve this chart and figure out which is which. Because of the events of the game, we know that the top one is Foxy and the bottom one is Freddy. To recap the important stuff so far, this is the schedule the game gives us. On nights 1 and 2, you shock Baby because she was booked. You don't shock her on night 3 because she was available all day. She goes to a private show on night 4 and is scheduled for maintenance on night 5. Ballora and Funtime Foxy are shocked on nights 1, 2, and 3 when they're booked the whole way through. You never shock Funtime Freddy, and because you didn't shock him on night 2 when you were supposed to, Hand Unit tells you on that day, and that day alone, that you did a bad job. The only time you ever work on an animatronic that doesn't line up with this schedule is Funtime Freddy on night 3. But again, this can be explained by the circumstances of the game. After Hand Unit tells us that we did a bad job, he tells us why we have to work on Funtime Freddy on night 3. Listen carefully to the language he uses.
Due to unforeseen malfunctions from today's shows, your nightly duties will require you to perform maintenance that you may or may not be skilled enough to perform. It became necessary for technicians to attempt to disconnect Funtime Freddy's power module. However, they were unsuccessful. You will need to reach the parts and service room on the other side of Funtime Auditorium to perform the procedure yourself.
Hand Unit tells us that following a show, Freddy began to malfunction. Not a booked out party like the others, a scheduled in-house performance. And, unlike the others, Freddy wasn't shocked on night 2 like he was supposed to be. So what happened? Well, he lashed out. He had too much energy because we didn't reset him, and, according to Hand Unit, he physically harmed 2 technicians, bad enough that they had to be sent away for several weeks to recover, which conveniently leaves us, Michael, to take over tasks that we're not qualified to handle. Hand Unit even specifies that these malfunctions were unforeseen. It's defined that way because the schedule doesn't account for this. The other technicians were called in to do this task when they otherwise shouldn't have been. We've explained 4 nights of the schedule so far, and now we can circle back to the original point. The squelchy noises coming from Circus Baby on night 5. The entire reason I looked back into Sister Location was because of this sound, because I thought it might be Elizabeth in there, and because that would screw up the entire timeline. But with the revelation of this schedule, we finally have an answer that doesn't mess up the entire timeline. Well, at least not quite as badly. On night 5, Baby gives us a hint that we all overlooked because none of us ever took her too seriously.
Something bad happened yesterday. Something bad always happens. I don't want it to happen again.
2 things here. This is the only time in the entire game that anyone refers to a malfunction or event involving the animatronics as something that happened yesterday. Now, this changes everything because Night 5 takes place on a Sunday, which means yesterday, in this case, would have been Saturday. So what was the bad thing that happened on Saturday? Well, let's go back to the schedule. According to the chart, Circus Baby and Ballora were assigned exclusively to a private event that day.
There is something bad inside of me.
Something bad inside of me, huh? Think back to everything we see from Circus Baby in this game. Specifically what happens whenever she's alone with somebody. A giant claw comes out of her stomach, and she grabs them, dragging them into her stomach hatch, and boom. There's something bad inside of her. Something bad happened yesterday. Something bad always happens. It happened again. At a private party on Saturday, Circus Baby was likely left alone with another child, and just like years ago, she did what she was designed to do, luring the child in and kidnapping them, bringing them back down here to the underground testing bunker. Only this time, we don't see it happen in a minigame. We just hear the aftermath. That awful sound playing from inside Baby on Night 5 is not Elizabeth. It's somebody else. Someone who disappeared the day before. A child's corpse still trapped inside of her. And given the way she speaks on this night, these exact events have likely been happening with tons of kids over the years. The only problem with this particular connection is that the sound persists when we send Circus Baby to the scooping room and when only Ennard is following us. But then in the private room, the sound doesn't play at all when Ennard is around. There is an audio coding error immediately after this vent section at the scooper part, so maybe Scott was just having a rough day that day in terms of coding, but there's no way to figure out if he meant to turn this sound off when you leave parts and service. I'd say, given that the sound plays when working on Baby and doesn't play the other times we see Ennard, I'd still say it's more likely associated with Baby than Ennard, because it plays 100% of the time we physically see her on screen. But we don't even really need this sound to link the schedule and Baby's dialogue to the idea of new kids being captured. That idea in and of itself is solid just with the evidence. So at this point in the night, the three of us had gathered so much information from the source code that we went back to look at other parts of the source code to see if we could find something else. Wait, what's this? Secret text. It says, like the video or you're stupid. Oh, Scott, you shouldn't have. The first thing we wanted to touch on was the out-of-service animatronic, so we could try and figure out who that was. With knowledge from the week before, after all the theories about Foxy being out of order because he did the bite of 87, we can conclude that this animatronic is probably out of service because it was associated with a dangerous event. This brings us back to Night 4, where we're put into a spring-lock suit that was, and I quote, not used the way it was meant to, and that Baby specifically describes as being too dangerous. I think that the suit we're in on Night 4 is the out-of-service animatronic that's listed on this schedule. Oh, by the way, this suit is also probably on the other side of the glass on Night 5, right by Ennard. Because Ennard presses the button for the scooper over there, like the technicians had to do on Night 4. And the technicians' voices on that night are crisp and clear, not muffled as if we're hearing them through a window. Which means that me and Cryo were wrong. The final piece of source code we really looked into were the 3 client directories that Afton Robotics is linked to. These directories are Chica's Party World, Private B-Day Booking, and CRMN_INST. Now, at first glance, we should interpret these abbreviated words as being exactly what they appear to be. Stuff like children_ent and crm_inst were easily interpreted as children entertainment and criminal institution/crewman installation. That's how they were interpreted when they were first shown off to the community, and nobody thought twice about it. But consider the modern day context. Consider the fact that these were made by William Afton, a man who notoriously hides in plain sight. creating fictitious scenarios where he's front and center with the kids, as well as blending in as just another mascot during the MCI. With this in mind, I think what we see in the source code is also an act of William hiding his wickedness in plain sight. Look at the very first client directory, the one for Chica's Party World. Very few things are abbreviated here, and nothing is suspiciously capitalized. Everything is as it seems. I think that Chica's Party World is an actual legitimate business, something that William runs on the side that's completely clean and has nothing criminal going on. This would be to generate revenue to fund his less innocent ventures. Now, as you go further into the client directories, things get progressively more cryptic. Here's a theory you may have heard before. CRMN_INST being the term for criminal institution makes no sense. Both other directories relate to endeavors that Afton is directly involved in. Chica's Party World, which has animatronics he's got rights to, and private birthday booking, which is Circus Baby's entertainment and rental. That's what this place is said to do on night one. Afton doesn't own a prison as far as we're aware of. He doesn't own a criminal institution, but he does own a CRMN INST, a child remnant installer. This directory is the shortest, with only 2 file paths and no additional information on what's going on. Chica's Party World has other branches like birthday props and novelties that give you more context to the business. This directory doesn't. If anyone were to look at this directory, they'd be able to glean no context as to what the directory is actually for. It's deliberately left ambiguous by Afton because it's fucking illegal. Speaking of that, and a detail I have not seen mentioned anywhere elsewhere. I have searched, but I haven't seen this, so correct me if I'm wrong. The only other phrase formatted like CRMN_INST, which I expect to be something illegal, with one set of capital letters and an underscore in between the words, rather than the words being mushed together, is children_ent. There would be no reason for this to be abbreviated in the same way as CRMN_INST unless they were both similarly sinister. So, I don't think this stands for children entertainment. I think it stands for the other thing the Funtimes are designed to do. The 5 on-location animatronics from the private birthday booking are known for initiating and assisting in children entrapment. This is the entire purpose of the Funtimes. They were built for the sake of entrapping children, and hidden in the source code, we can see even more evidence of that, but it's loosely veiled in case of prying eyes. Back to the note of the remnant installer, we need to talk about what comes right after it. Project. This project is part of the remnant installer. Note the slash between the words. It's not CRMN INST project, it's CRMN INST, and then the project is a separate thing. And with the events of the game in mind, I think we can figure out what this project is. We know it's a project related to the remnant installer, the scooper. So now tell me, what do we see the scooper do in this game? Specifically at the climax of the game, right before the credits. The last canon thing we're meant to see. Well, it completes a project that's been in the works since the very start of the game. The plan that Mike reflects on in his closing words in Custom Night. The game ends with us putting Elizabeth back together. And the way that's done is by assembling all the Funtime endos into ennard. That's right. This project in the source code is referring to putting Elizabeth back together. The project is ennard. Why did Mike never dodge the scooper? Why'd he keep going back despite the obvious danger that was present? Because everything that happened to him was planned for the start. he knew what he was getting into, and judging by his final words, the only thing that actually surprised him is the fact that he survived. But getting scooped and forming Ennard and putting Elizabeth back together, that was always the project. Sister Location is a giant death trap by design. For Michael, and for a bunch more kids than just the MCI. And with the use of the source code, we can finally prove that, once and for all. This doesn't exactly shatter the lore in any ginormous way, but it does mean we have to start rethinking some things. If a bunch more kids got captured that we don't know about, that for one could mean that Molten Freddy is not just Molten MCI, but the MCI kids fused with a bajillion other kids. It would also mean that since there is really solid evidence that more kids go missing in this game, but it's never mentioned again, then you can't really use the argument that the DCI can't have happened because we don't see those kids later, because the same thing is happening here. If you enjoyed this week's video, then you should do a giant backflip dive off a 200-foot diving board and land boner first on the subscribe button, because that really helps the channel out. Oh, also, I just restocked the cool Michael Afton inspired hoodies and t-shirts, which are in the description. They're really cozy, so grab one while you can. Okay, bye.